You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts.
All right, Black and White Sports supporters. Well, sometimes selfishly, mainly on the football channel, I will do a video that I think is interesting. It may not get any views at all. I don't know. But I've said for quite some time, I felt like eventually, somehow, some way, the NFL would put its name above the UFL logo. Some kind of an agreement would be made between the two leagues that possibly the UFL, trying to grow its business, would try to become a official development league for the National Football League. And we've got a couple of stories, and I find it rather interesting. Let's just go back, before we jump into the meat of it, let's just go back to about a week ago when UFL owner Mike Rapoli was discussing future expansion of the UFL. And he said one of the major implications for the NFL is expansion. So he believes that the NFL are getting close to announcing, or at some point, they've got plans to expand by 2 teams. During his press conference, Rapoli discussed potential growth plans for the UFL, including adjusting the league's schedule, adding games, and potentially introducing more teams. However, he casually mentioned that the NFL is talking about 2 more expansion teams. If that's true, should the NFL expand to 2 more teams or even more? Okay. Well, that tells you right there that obviously Rapoli is talking to people in the know in the NFL. All right, because they're trying to decide if they want to put certain teams or move certain UFL teams to places that don't have NFL teams. Right? I've long said some of the quarterbacks in this league could desperately benefit to getting reputations in a professional league. Anthony Richardson is a big one that I think of. Even a Zach Wilson could use repetitions in another professional league. All right? And it would add some, obviously, the UFL would want to do it because it adds name recognition. Like Shedeur Sanders desperately needs reps. I mean, the benefit of that league to have somebody like Shedeur Sanders playing quarterback before the start, and I suspect what will happen is they will move the league till right after the Super Bowl. It will go back to starting right after the Super Bowl. I think they're looking at that right now because there's too much. Got to compete with too many other sports for the UFL. Sean Payton right here. This was just 3 days ago, commenting on the fact that the Broncos signed 2 players out of the UFL. And he talked about the UFL being a developmental league and his coaches. And I heard this, I was listening to somebody's podcast the other day, and they were talking about the fact that Peyton was, it might have been Pro Football Talk, was looking at the UFL as a developmental league. Well, now look at this. Details of NFL-UFL arrangement for underperforming officials are still being worked out. So they're in negotiations right now to do something together involving the referees. I think this is a great idea. A new labor deal between the NFL and NFL Referees Association puts a premium on competition and accountability. Low-performing officials could be assigned to work in the UFL. As explained in a recent ESPN item that reviews new elements of the latest CBA for officials, the UFL-NFL connection piqued our curiosity. We asked the NFL for more information as to how this would work, given the UFL would have to make room for any regulated NFL officials. Per an NFL spokesperson, the details are still being worked out, From a CBA perspective, we now have the ability to work more closely with underperforming officials, and one way we have is for them to get additional reps in a league like the UFL. A UFL source tells PFT that 3 or 4 NFL officials have worked in the UFL over the past 2 seasons. So the pipeline already exists. This is getting interesting. Now, 23 UFL players have now signed with NFL teams since the conclusion of the spring's season. This is getting more and more interesting. There are several NFL, and they've always pulled a few players out of the UFL, but it's getting more interesting that it's starting to get broader and broader. That I think the quote that was said the other day involving Sean Payton was, are the scouts for teams looking now more at the UFL than they are the CFL? And I got the notion the answer was yes, that was the implied response. As noted by the UFL on Tuesday, so far 23 players who have played in the league this spring have been signed to NFL rosters. The Lions have brought in the most UFL players. They've signed 4. Falcons, Cowboys, Saints each signed 3. Bears, Broncos, Dolphins, Eagles have signed 2. And the Bills and Steelers have each brought in 1. By the way, the most popular position that they're signing is receiver. 10 out of 23 signings have been receivers. There have been 4 defensive backs, 3 defensive ends, and 2 offensive linemen signed. It's a developmental league for the NFL now, it looks like. By the way, we didn't talk about this. The United Bowl got, I think, 985,000 viewers. The 2 games prior, the semifinals and the game before that, each drew 1 million views. The UFL is getting plenty of television ratings. Their ratings were up versus previous years this year. Their biggest problem right now is attendance. Well, if you could figure out how to get better players in there for development, yada, 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 in some kind of a joint agreement situation, then you're going to start getting attendance that's going up. But I think you have to see teams in the NFL being willing to send guys over to the UFL. That's going to become the question. Are they going to be willing to send a player to the UFL to get reps, particularly quarterbacks? I'm just pointing that out. Dylan Gabriel, another good example of a guy that could use reps. Jarrett Stidham with the Broncos could use reps. You know, there's guys all across the league, the Skylar Thompsons and we could go down the line. Drew Aller is a perfect example. A guy that's trying to learn how to play the quarterback position again. And then who knows, maybe you get some coaches involved that can be used as a coaching development pipeline back to the National Football League. In other words, quarterback coaches in the NFL are head coaches in the UFL. And then these guys are getting reps with actual NFL coaches. In other words, they all start running NFL schemes. I think that's the big thing. Because clearly, development with quarterbacks, and I've talked about it before, there are absolutely quarterbacks that could have played in the NFL that slipped through the cracks because they did not get enough reps to develop. Taylon Green, Cleveland Browns, literally during mini camp and camp, there were days he got 0 pass attempts. I mean, I see that and I'm like, if you end up letting this guy go, how are you going to know if he could do anything? If he's not going to get any reps? Tell me what you think, guys. I think it's interesting. Coaches talking up the UFL, more players signing from the UFL to the NFL, and now an agreement for referees from the NFL going to the UFL. I'm thinking NFL presents UFL. I know there'll be some fans that'll be like, I don't want the NFL involved. Okay, that's fine, but if you want the spring league to keep going, figuring out where your talent can grow at quarterback is a big deal, I think, for the UFL. Tell me what you think. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.